Hi, all of you in Roxaboxen land. I know that we talked this week a little bit about making maps, and I wanted to just describe to you a little bit about where we're going and how we can do that. And I didn't want you to get all concerned or anxious about it because we're going to make it really easy. And so I thought I'd just pause and give you a little recording on this so that it would relieve a little anxiety that you might be having about it. And so we could show you how it could be pretty fun to do. And it's sort of like developing your own little code. And you can take this and make it just anything you want it to be. And it's really your own kind of fantasy island. When I was growing up, there was a TV show called Fantasy Island, and it was kind of a fun show. Maybe some of people, maybe your grandma and grandpa might know about that. Anyway, what I want to show you is that this can be a really fun thing, and you can just make up your own code for what the symbols are that you want to have it be on a map. And that's what really maps are all about. It's just about drawing shapes and it's making codes for what those shapes represent. So I thought I'd get started on that today and just get you thinking about it. And you don't have to have any fancy tools to do it. So let me share the screen with you and so that you can see what I'm drawing down here. So this is just a map that I have. I'm going to turn off my, and you can see that if you can draw triangles and little hatch marks and little wavy lines, you can make a pretty cool map. And it doesn't have to be anything really fancy, but it can end up looking pretty cool and it can convey something that you want it to be. Now, you can get really fancy if you want to, but you can make it really simple like this. Well, how did I start to do it? Well, I started by making a legend, and a legend is what we call in the map business a key, right? So here's how I started to do that. I started by making a key of saying, well, how do I want to represent things on my map? So I said, well, the first thing that I think I want to do, I'm going to turn the slide off. The first thing that I think I want to do is I want to figure out what I want my coastline to look like. And by the way, all I've used for this is I've used just like a thin Sharpie. You could use a flare pen. I don't know if you know what a flare pen is, but it's just like a felt marker. And you could use that, or you could use a regular Sharpie. It's a little bit thicker. You could use a combination of that. You could start with a pencil and then go to a marker. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And I just have computer paper here. So we just go really not, not hard, difficult at all. So I'm just going to think about how would I represent the coastline and the water. Well, here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to think about, well, I'm just going to kind of go like this for the border of the land. And I might go back over it, especially if it's the, I might make a thin line. And then here's where I might come back with my Sharpie. let Miss Lynn find her Sharpie. Okay, so here I have a little bit thicker one, you know, the traditional Sharpie that's a little bit thicker. So I might make the outline of the land, you know, where the actual land is a little bit thicker. So I might go back over that and make it a little bit thicker for the outline of the coast. Oh, okay, no problems. Okay. And then if there's any waterways, I can go in because we're going to have rivers. So the rivers will kind of look like this. And if I have a lake, here's a lake. Okay. All right. And then, of course, I'm going to represent the actual water with your typical what you've done for years, the little squiggly lines. Oops. Okay, easy peasy, right? And then here's the water. Okay, so now we know there's the water out here. Here's the coastline. Okay, so that's how I'm going to show my water. Okay, here's the water here, here's the inside, and here's the land here. Okay, now how am I going to show mountains? Well, here's how I'm going to show my mountains. Oh, my marker is not doing too well. If I just want to show a really simple way to show mountains, I can do it just by showing triangles. That's really easy. And the only thing that's tricky about this is you want your mountains to be all symmetrical if you're going to do this. And mountains usually kind of go in a range. So when you put them on the map, you're going to want to think of having them follow sort of a range. So they kind of bend around. When you look at mountains on a map, they usually kind of look at maps, look at actual maps. They kind of have follow a range, don't they? So when you put them on there, they're going to have kind of a range. You could kind of make a squiggly line on some of them. No, my pen's not working too well. And then kind of color some of them in to leave some of them, you know, like they're snow-capped mountains. And then the rest of them you can color in like I colored the rest of them in black. Okay, I'm not going to take the rest of the time to do this, but you get the idea. So you would color all the rest of these in. Okay, so I'm not going to take the time to do that now, but you saw on my map, well, they would all be colored in. Okay, then what about hills? Okay, hills, you could just do like this, just like this. All right, they're not as big, so we just do this. Okay, little round things like that. Easy, right? Okay, let's move on to trees. So my legend for trees could be, I could do several different kinds of trees. I could just have little circles with a stick. That's pretty easy. I could have a little more like egg-shaped, taller, you know, like this. I could do, this one is kind of one of my favorites, a line and then three little V, upside down V's. I kind of like those. Line and upside down V's. Like that. Okay, so that's another type of tree. So that gives you some variety. You can get into other styles later, and we can talk about that in class, but those are kind of interesting little trees, and so that gives you a little variety on your map. Okay, let's move on to what about if you have a different type of terrain, like let's say a desert. Come on, pen. You know the way you can spell desert, how you remember the difference between desert and dessert when you spell it? Because you want more dessert. So there's two S's in dessert. That's how I always remember it. Okay, so desert only has one S. And so you could just mark that by putting like some little dots, 3 or 4 or 5 dots together, like that. And that could show that the ground is all dry like sand. So that's how you could mark a desert. What about a swamp? If you want a swamp, here's an idea for a swamp. You could just either put 3 lines together, like this is a marsh. You could get fancy and kind of go 3 of them kind of together like this. Like that, either way. But that could be a swamp. Okay, so you put it on the map like that. And you can see that I kind of used all of those ideas here. The only thing I didn't take time to do was I didn't color in my mountains. So I just didn't take the time to do that. Now you'll notice, see, I have a desert over here. I have different kinds of trees. Now you also see that I have a road here. So the road is because we have these are rivers here, and we don't want to get the rivers mixed up with the road, we do the road. Come on, pen. Just will give me a little more. The road, we want it to be like this with dotted lines, so we don't get it mixed up with a river, okay? And it will go from like city to city. So that brings up that we have different kinds of cities. So you saw one dark, oops, I guess I should show you. One dark dot here and a dot with a bigger line there. So cities can look like this. If this is a, you could say a town, or could be, let's say a village. Let's say this. I should have said a village first. A town is a little bit bigger. So it could be like this. I should have done this backwards. Town is a little bit bigger. A village is smaller in population. So it could be like this. A city is much bigger. So you could put it with a star and then a circle around it. However you want to do it, but some way to show that one's bigger than the other. So that's the way I kind of like to do it. So then you could show when you're going from one place to another, the size of where you're going, okay? Then you could have, we talked about, you know, shipping things different places. So if you wanted a railroad, of course, a regular way that you might do a railroad, instead of doing it like this, you could do a line going like this, that's smooth, but then you'd have to put another one going right next to it, kind of like a railroad track. And then you could just put lines in between. And that could be a railroad. So that could be a railroad. You might have a better way of drawing a railroad track. I think that I've seen them done differently where there's like little hatch marks kind of. So you might want to do it a different way, and that's fine. However you want to see, it's just a matter of symbols. So however you want the symbols to come up with, that's fine. The key thing to this is that you're going to put this on the, some of these things you're going to put on your map. So when you draw the map then, over here, you're going to then save space down at the bottom of your map for a key. And over here you would have, you'd get your ruler and you would put a space over here and you would put the little symbols like, you know, this, and you'd say tree. And then you'd go like this and go mountain, etc. So you tell what those different symbols are so that we would know. And that's called a legend, okay? And then up here too, all of the maps would need to have a compass rose, which I'm sure you probably already know about, so that we know which direction is north on your map. So this is just a simple way to get started. You can look up lots of different ideas, but basically all you need is a pen, a pencil, some computer paper, and some creative ideas in your head. And if you can draw circles and curvy lines and you know, I would suggest though that you start by putting down your ideas of what you want to, how you want to draw them, and put your key down first. And then the other thing that is, I think, really helpful is when you start to draw your map, how do you start? Well, the first thing that you do is you take, and we'll talk more about this in class next time, but the first thing that you do is you take your pencil and you draw the shape of what you want your country to look like, you know. And then the next thing that you do is you draw in your big things. Like you kind of draw, you don't, it doesn't even, you just take your pencil and you kind of lightly draw, where do I want that mountain range to go? And it doesn't even have to look like your mountain range. You just kind of put a big blob in. Well, I know I want the mountains to kind of take up this space here. And I know I kind of want a lake right in this area here. You don't even have to say, well, that's exactly the shape of the lake. I know I just want a lake there. And I know I want some rivers kind of here and here. And I know I want an airport over here. So that means I need a runway kind of right here. So you start just kind of drawing in your big shapes first. And then you know you kind of want a forest here. So you draw in a space kind of for a forest there. So as you plot out the big things, then you know where those are and you can erase those shapes later, but put in the big things first. Then it's easier to fill in later with these really tiny little dots. You know, that's easier to figure out later, but put in the big things first, like the mountain range and the lake, and then know where you want these forests to be or where you want like ports, where you want an airport, where you want some of these big things. And then the rest of it will come along just fine. So that's kind of where we're headed. And that's kind of what we talked about this week in one of the classes. So I hope that's helpful. And I will see you next week. Okay. See you later. Have a nice weekend. Bye.